MLB The Show 23 just concluded its tech test a few days ago, and it is a much different game than MLB The Show 22, thankfully. Let's get into the big differences that are in the game that we see immediately. These differences include anything from hitting to pitching to fielding. Now, these are only going to be the big differences that are the everyday things that we see. I'm not going to get into the little minute things just because a lot of those things might not be there when the game actually launches, or may be a little bit different. However, I feel like these changes that were made were at least solid enough to be about the same when the game releases. So let's go take a look at the first one. So the first thing up that we're going to talk about is just hitting in general. This year, at least in the tech test, the hitting felt a lot more consistent than it did in MLB The Show 22. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the dynamic PCIs. And the dynamic PCIs, the way they work is the closer to the middle of the strike zone that you are, the bigger your PCI is going to be, with a maximum representation either included by your contact or your clutch. So what I mean by that is if you have a fastball right down the middle and you want to swing at it, a guy with 125 contact or 125 clutch will have the maximum PCI size that he could have for any baseball player in the game. Now, clutch, as I said in the features and as we've seen in the tech test, clutch only applies when you have a runner in scoring position, so it is something to keep in mind now for the entire course of the game. For example, you have Brian Reynolds on the left. The ball that he hit there on the left is actually right just on the outside part of the plate. Now, that PCI size with 94 clutch, if that ball was thrown down the middle, the PCI would actually be much bigger. As I said, as you go away from the middle of the zone, the PCI will get smaller, which is actually a really good thing because it balances the strike zone out. Obviously, if you're going away from the plate and you're trying to reach for it, and even though that was a perfect swing, that is one of those situations where you look at it and it's you shouldn't be just easily able to get it with the same PCI size, because ultimately, even in real life, it is a harder swing to actually make. Now, the next thing they added in MLB The Show 23 is called the bat PCI. This is something where you see like altitude, circles, or diamonds. It replaces that. Now, I think this is a really good idea because this actually shows you where you would expect the bat to go on a swing. The only issue that it may implement is that the PCI is not actually the baseball bat. The PCI represents where your batter is looking, and if it looks like a bat and you think you squared it up, you could possibly think, oh, well, the bat was right there. I put the bat with the bat PCI on the baseball. However, it's still the batter looking at the ball. There is still a little bit of RNG to it. However, it did feel really good to use this PCI. I would honestly think I'm going to go into next year using it, and I think it just put a lot in my mind of, well, I'm getting the middle of the bat now, and I get a lot more hits and a lot more hard contact as well. Next up, we have the exit velocity and the launch angle actually making sense for once. When you plug in the launch angle and the exit velocity into Baseball Savant, you could actually see the exact stats that you would expect. So if you get a ball that's a little bit of a higher launch angle and a little bit less exit velocity, it is interesting to see that, okay, maybe this is only 3% of being a home run. I have noticed that with a lot of the swings, if it looks to be like 10% or higher on Baseball Savant for a home run, I think it could ultimately be a homer, but usually it's pretty close. It's usually either a double, an out, or a hard out, if anything, because of a shift. Another thing is that the exit velocities have actually seemed to have been dropped a little bit. Now, that's both a good and a bad thing. Lower exit velocities means that guys with really bad power, or really just crap hits in general, they don't fluke through the infield as often as they used to. However, that also means that the guys with the higher power ratings, they do tend to get robbed a little bit of hard hits or home runs in general. Now, that could have just been something that we've seen just based on stadium, because the 4 stadiums we played out in the tech test really weren't anything good. I think the highest elevation stadium was like 300 feet. A lot of the competitive community plays at Laughing Mountain or Coors, which is close to, either is a max elevation stadium or it's close to a max elevation stadium. I am curious to see if the exit velocities are fixed on that. Me personally, I don't think exit velocities should be influenced by elevation. Physically, that really doesn't make sense to me. Now, I do understand that the flight of the ball is very dependent on elevation, but I think 107 miles an hour off the bat should look the same no matter where you play, at least in terms of PCI placement and timing. Now, how far that 107 goes, that all depends on launch angle and elevation and stuff like that, but I do feel like ultimately a perfect swing. If you look back at this video, there's a perfect swing with Brian Reynolds. He has 125 power. That actually was a flyout. I don't think 99 miles an hour off the bat on a perfect swing with 125 power, I don't really think that makes sense, especially since that is the max power rating. He also had quirks, which are all active now, which boost his stats. I think ultimately that probably should have been a home run, but again, that could have just been a stadium issue. Petco has been known in real life, especially, to kind of take home runs away from people. It is a bit more of a pitcher's park, at least in terms of home runs. But I do think that is either something that's going to get addressed early on, or it could just be a stadium-specific issue. Next up is pitching. Oh, honestly, there really wasn't that much of a pitching difference from what I've seen. They did kind of buff pinpoint pitching a little bit. It did seem a little bit more accurate on those perfect pitches, and the only noticeable change that they made was when you throw a perfect pitch, you now see the par region that you would see before it, but this time it actually shows you where the ball lands inside of it. Now, if you don't know what the par region is, that's that little gray circle around the baseball before you throw it. Now, that is something that's really important. I do feel like just overall this game gave a lot better feedback on all ends of the field. And I feel like having that feedback in real time when you throw the ball, you can go, oh, I kind of hung it. Well, I could see why the par size was massive. Now, there still was a small issue where every now and then on a perfect pitch, that ball would end up going outside the par, but it would be like barely outside. So I think it's still fixable, and I think that is something that they will address by the time the game actually launches. Moving on to fielding, this is arguably one of the biggest changes that they've made in the game. The new throwing meter is a learning curve. That is 100% true. In MLB The Show 22, if you had a diving play, the meter was really just a free out every single time. You just got it anywhere in the green region. It's like, oh, you're fine. Didn't matter if you're making a diving play or if you took 8 steps to get to the ball. Everything was the exact same, and there really wasn't any good handicap or anything like that that would have any sort of skill gap on that type of play style. Now, because of this game change, the throwing meter has completely changed everything. If you throw it into the yellow region, there's a chance that your first baseman may miss the pick that is based on his fielding rating, and then on top of that, not only could he possibly miss it, but if you get in the red, that ball's sailing over his head. I had so many times I would throw the ball to second base, first base, on that red region, and it would be an error every single time. Now, I think this is a very good thing to add to the game. The meter also moves depending on how much your player moves. So if you make that crazy diving play, or if you take 8 steps with your shortstop to actually try to make the play, don't expect the meter to be in the same exact spot every time. And I really like that because it adds that little bit of a skill gap to the kinds of players that like to make those kinds of crazy plays. And it also allows the runner to have a little bit more of a chance to actually beat that out or get on due to an error. Also, when it comes to outfield throws, it's a similar situation. Depending on the distance of the throw and if your guy is moving, how he sets up, you're not able to just easily gun somebody out at third base if you're on the move, moving away from the base. Now you actually have to kind of strategize, where do you think you'll go? And ultimately, this is just something that's a really good feature because it allows you to have an extra layer to the game, an extra layer to that skill gap, and it makes you think before you even pitch the ball. Okay, well, if this goes to the outfield, if it gets in this area, or even before you catch the ball, okay, I'm going to throw to the second here because a throw to third base would be near impossible. I don't know, there's so many new outcomes that could happen because of it. And honestly, I think this year is the year to be very aggressive on the base path, especially early on in the game where everyone's still getting used to that throwing meter. I think now is the perfect time to just run as much as you possibly can. If I was to suggest any change to the throwing meter, I would say please speed it up just a tiny bit. There are a few plays in the tech test where the guy just kind of stood there while I was trying to finish the meter on like a bang bang type of play. Now, I don't think that is anything specific to like the type of animation that he did or anything like that, but I do think just ultimately just a tiny bit of a speed boost to it would make things a little bit better, just so I could actually, finish the play every single time, even on those bang bang plays. Ultimately, though, defense did feel a lot better. You weren't seeing super dives left and right. There were a bunch of diving plays that could have been made, but we started to see the ball get knocked down a lot more rather than them actually just catching it and just like Supermaning it to first and getting you out. As well as defense in the outfield, I felt like the reaction ratings and the fielding ratings actually made a difference because it determined like the types of animations that they got. And ultimately, the animations they changed in this game are actually really good. They changed the bit of urgency in the outfielders, urgency in the infielders on, like I said, those bang-bang type of plays. And I feel like ultimately it was just a really good quality of life thing to add because there were a lot of plays in MLB The Show 22 where they field a routine ground ball and take like 6 steps and they just wouldn't be able to get the easy out. So having those animation changes, I think, is a really good thing to have for this year's game in terms of quality of life. But that is going to be it today, guys. I appreciate you guys watching this video. Please be sure to leave a like and sub to the channel. Leave a comment on this video to see what was your favorite part of the tech test and what was your least favorite. I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are on the game. Are you pre-ordering the game? Are you going to wait to see if everything sticks until launch? Let me know what you think. I hope y'all have a fantastic day. I appreciate you guys watching this video. We got a lot more MLB The Show 23 content coming your way. Have a great one, y'all. I'll catch you next time.